It was a bright, sunny Saturday afternoon in Oakwood Hills. That's the name of my neighborhood, a quiet little place with green lawns, tall trees, and houses all lined up nice and neat. Most days, nothing exciting happens here. No big adventures, no wild surprises. Or at least, that's what everyone thought. But this day? Oh, this day was going to be different. Way different. My name's Jake. I'm just a regular guy, nothing fancy about me. I like simple stuff, playing outside, eating snacks, and listening to my favorite music. And when I say music, I mean loud music. The kind that makes your feet tap and your head bob. I've got these big speakers in my yard, and on weekends, I turn them up high. It's my way of relaxing, you know? The week is for school or work or whatever, but Saturday? That's my time. So there I was, chilling in my backyard. The sun was shining, the sky was blue, and I had a cold glass of lemonade in my hand. I'd squeezed the lemons myself that morning. Yep, I'm pretty proud of that. My speakers were blasting some awesome rock tunes. The drums went boom boom boom, and the guitars screamed like they were alive. I kicked back in my chair, closed my eyes, and smiled. Life was good. Really good. But then, I felt it. You know that feeling when someone's watching you? Like little prickles on the back of your neck? I opened my eyes, and there she was, Karen. She lived right across the street from me, and oh boy, she was trouble with a capital T. Karen wasn't like most neighbors. She didn't wave hello or ask how your day was. Nope. Karen was the kind of person who always had something to complain about. Always. Picture this, Karen standing there in her yard, arms crossed, staring at me like I'd just kicked her cat or something. She had this perfect little fence around her house, white and shiny, not a speck of dirt on it. She'd painted it herself last summer, and she acted like it made her the queen of the neighborhood. In her hand, she held a clipboard. That clipboard was her weapon. She carried it everywhere, writing down stuff she didn't like. A kid's bike left in a driveway? Scribble, scribble. Someone's grass too long? Scribble, scribble. And now, me playing my music? Oh, you bet she was scribbling about that too. I could see her eyes locked on me, hard and mean. She didn't even blink. It was like she was trying to burn a hole through me with her glare. I knew that look. It meant trouble was coming. Big trouble. Karen wasn't just going to stand there and frown. She was going to do something about it. That's how she was always poking her nose where it didn't belong. Now, let me tell you a little more about Oakwood Hills so you get the picture. It's a small place, maybe 20 houses total. Everyone knows everyone. There's Mr. Thompson, who's old and grumpy but secretly feeds the stray cats. There's the Carter family, with their noisy dog that barks at squirrels all day. And then there's me, Jake, the guy with the loud music. We all get along okay, mostly. But Karen? She's like the dark cloud on a sunny day. Nobody really likes her, but nobody says it out loud. They're too afraid she'll write them up on that dumb clipboard. Back to that Saturday. I was sitting there, sipping my lemonade, when I saw Karen start to move. She didn't just stand and stare forever, no, that wasn't her style. She took a step closer to her fence, then another. Her flip-flops made this loud slap 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 sound on the pavement. It was annoying, like someone tapping a pencil over and over when you're trying to think. I tried to ignore her, but it was hard. She was coming for me, and I knew it. Hey, Jake, she yelled, her voice sharp like a teacher catching you chewing gum in class. I peeked over at her, pretending I didn't care. Hey, Karen, I said back, nice and calm. I even gave her a little wave, just to bug her. She didn't wave back. Of course not. She pointed at my speakers instead, her finger shaking a little like she was so mad she couldn't keep it still. See, Karen had this thing about rules. She was part of the HOA, that's the Homeowners Association. It's a group of grown ups who make rules for the neighborhood, like how tall your grass can be or what color your mailbox should be. Dumb stuff, if you ask me. But Karen? She loved it. She acted like she was the boss of everything. If you broke one of her precious rules, she'd tell on you faster than you can say time out. And my music? Oh, she hated it. She'd complained about it before, saying it was too loud, too wild, too everything. But this time, She looked madder than ever. I leaned back in my chair and took another sip of lemonade. The ice clinked against the glass, and the cold felt nice going down my throat. I wasn't scared of Karen. Not yet, anyway. She could glare all she wanted, I wasn't turning my music off. It was my yard, my day, my fun. What was she going to do, yell at me some more? Big deal. But here's the thing, and this is where it gets good. Karen didn't know something. Nope, she had no clue. While she was busy staring me down, acting like she was in charge, something else was going on. Something sneaky. Something huge. Her own secrets were hiding, waiting to jump out like a jack in the box. And when they did, oh man, it was going to be wild. She thought she was the one with the power, ready to ruin my day. But she didn't see what was coming. Not even a little bit. Let me paint the scene for you some more, because this day wasn't just about music and Karen's grumpy face. That morning, I'd noticed something weird. I hadn't told anyone yet, it was my little secret for now. See, when I went to grab the mail earlier, I saw 2 cop cars parked down the street. Not right by my house, but a few houses away, near the big oak tree that's been there forever. The cars weren't moving. No lights flashing, no sirens blaring. Just sitting there, quiet and still. I thought maybe they were waiting for something, but I didn't know what. Cops don't just hang out in Oakwood Hills for no reason. We're too boring for that. Or so I thought. I didn't tell Karen about the cop cars. Why would I? She'd probably say it was my fault somehow, like my music made them show up. Huh? No way. But as I sat there in my yard, watching her get ready to freak out over my speakers, I started wondering. Why were those cops there? Who were they watching? It wasn't me, I hadn't done anything wrong. Just a guy with some tunes and a cold drink. So what was the deal? Karen didn't see the cop cars. She was too busy glaring at me, her clipboard hugged tight against her chest like it was her best friend. She probably thought she had everything under control. She always did. That's what made her so annoying. She acted like she ran the whole world, not just our little street. But this time, she was wrong. So wrong. And I couldn't wait to see her face when she figured it out. The music kept playing, loud and happy. The birds chirped along, hopping around in the trees. A breeze blew through, rustling the leaves and making my hair flop into my eyes. I pushed it back and grinned. Karen could huff and puff all she wanted, I wasn't scared of her. Not one bit. She thought she was about to win, but she didn't know the game was already changing. Something big was hiding, ready to pop out and surprise us all. So, tell me, what would you do if your neighbor started giving you the stink eye over something as simple as music? Would you turn it down? Ignore them? Or maybe crank it up louder just to see what happens? I want to know. Drop your answer in the comments, because this story's just getting started, and it's about to get crazy. My yard wasn't anything special, just a square of grass with a rickety old chair and a table I'd found at a garage sale. The speakers sat on that table, big and black and awesome. I'd saved up my allowance for months to buy them, well, my paycheck, I guess, since I'm not a kid anymore. But it felt like allowance money, you know? Hard-earned cash for something I really wanted. And now they were mine, pumping out music that filled the air with energy. I loved it. It made me feel free. Karen's yard, though. Totally different. Hers was like a picture from a magazine. The grass was always cut just right, not a blade out of place. She had these little flowers planted along her walkway, red ones, yellow ones, all in perfect rows. She'd spend hours out there, clipping and watering and fussing over them. I guess that's why she hated my music so much. To her, it was messy and loud, and messy things drove her nuts. I remember one time last month when she came over to complain. Not about music that day, just my trash cans. I'd left them by the curb a little too long after pickup, and she marched right up to my door about it. "Jake," she said, her voice all high and squeaky, "those cans are an eyesore. The rules say you bring them in by noon." I just shrugged and said, "Okay, Karen, I'll get to it." But I didn't. Not right away. And she wrote me up for it. Yep, a real note on her clipboard, like I was some criminal. Over trash cans. Can you believe that? That's the kind of person she was. Always looking for something to fix, something to control. And now, on this sunny Saturday, it was my music's turn to get her mad. I could see it in her eyes, those narrow, angry eyes. She wasn't going to let this go. Not today. She was ready to fight, and I was the target. But like I said, I wasn't worried. Not really. I had my lemonade, my tunes, and a whole afternoon to enjoy. Karen could stomp around and yell all she wanted, it wasn't going to ruin my day. At least, that's what I told myself. Deep down, though, I knew she'd try something. She always did. And with that clipboard in her hand, she looked like she meant business. The sun climbed higher in the sky, making everything warm and bright. A couple of kids rode by on their bikes, laughing and shouting. They didn't care about my music, they liked it, actually. One of them, little Tommy Carter from down the street, even waved at me. "Cool songs, Jake," he yelled. I waved back and gave him a thumbs up. See? Not everyone was a grump like Karen. Some people knew how to have fun. But Karen didn't wave at Tommy. She didn't even look at him. Her eyes were stuck on me, like I was the only thing in the world that mattered right then. I wondered what she was thinking. Was she planning to knock on my door again? Write me another nasty note? Or maybe something bigger, like calling someone to shut me down? I didn't know yet, but I had a feeling I'd find out soon. And those cop cars? They were still there, parked under the big oak tree. I glanced at them every now and then, just to check. Still no lights, still no movement. It was weird, but I didn't think too hard about it. Not yet. I figured maybe they were on a break or something. Cops need breaks too, right? Sipping coffee, eating donuts, normal stuff. That's what I told myself, anyway. The music switched to a new song, one with a fast beat and a singer who sounded like he was yelling about something important. I tapped my foot along, letting the sound wash over me. It was loud enough that I didn't hear Karen at first. She'd started talking again, louder this time, trying to get my attention. "Jake," she shouted, her voice cutting through the guitars. "Jake, I'm serious." I sighed and looked over at her. She was standing right at the edge of her yard now, so close to my side of the street that I could see the wrinkles on her forehead. She was mad, really mad. Her cheeks were pink, and her mouth was all tight like she'd just bitten a lemon. "What, Karen?" I called back, keeping my voice lazy and slow. I didn't want her to think she was getting to me. But she was already on a roll. "This music is too loud," she said, waving her clipboard like it was proof. "It's against the rules. You're bothering everyone." I wanted to laugh. Bothering everyone? Tommy didn't think so. The birds didn't think so. The only one bothered was her, and that didn't count in my book. "Relax, Karen," I said, taking another sip of lemonade. "It's just music. It's not hurting anybody." I grinned at her, nice and big, just to see if it'd make her madder. And oh boy, it did. Her eyes got even narrower, like little slits, and she huffed so loud I could hear it over the drums. "You'll see," she snapped. "You'll see what happens when you don't listen." And with that, she turned around and marched back toward her house, her flip-flops going slap 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 again. I watched her go, wondering what she meant. What was she going to do? Yell some more? Write a letter? Call the HOA people? I didn't know, but I wasn't scared. Not yet. And that's when I saw it, a tiny little hint of what was coming. As Karen stomped away, I noticed something move down the street. One of the cop cars. The door opened, real slow, and an officer stepped out. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at my music. He was looking at Karen's house. Just standing there, watching, like he was waiting for something. My stomach did a little flip. What was going on? Why was he watching her? I didn't say anything, didn't move. I just sat there, holding my lemonade, letting the music play. Karen didn't see the cop. She was too busy being mad at me. She had no idea someone was watching her, no idea her day was about to flip upside down. So, what about you? What would you do if your neighbor started giving you the stink eye over something as simple as music? Would you keep playing? Turn it off? Or make? Karen stormed over, her flip-flops slapping the pavement like she was on a mission. Slap slap slap, it was loud, like someone banging a drum, but not the fun kind from my music. She marched right up to the edge of my yard, her eyes blazing with anger. "Turn that noise down, Jake," she barked, pointing her finger at me like I'd just robbed a bank or eaten the last cookie from the jar. "This is a peaceful neighborhood, and you're ruining it." I looked at her, sitting there in my chair with my lemonade still cold in my hand. My speakers were blasting a song with a big, happy beat, and I wasn't about to let her ruin my fun. So I smirked just a little, to tease her, and reached over to my speakers. I turned the volume down one tiny notch. Not a lot, just enough to mess with her. "Relax, Karen," I said, keeping my voice nice and easy. "It's Saturday. Live a little." "Oh boy, that did it?" Her face turned redder than a ripe tomato sitting in the sun. I could almost see steam coming out of her ears, like in those cartoons when someone gets super mad. She took a big breath, puffing up her chest, and stared at me like she wanted to zap me with laser eyes. "You'll regret this," she hissed, her voice low and sharp, like a snake ready to bite. Then she yanked her phone out of her pocket, holding it up like it was some kind of magic wand. "I'm calling 911. You're disturbing the peace." I rolled my eyes so hard I thought they might fall out of my head. 911? Over music? Really? That was the silliest thing I'd ever heard. I mean, 911 is for emergencies, like if your house is on fire or a bear's chasing you down the street. Not for some guy playing rock tunes in his yard on a Saturday afternoon. But that was Karen for you, always making a mountain out of a molehill. I leaned back in my chair, took a slow sip of my lemonade, and watched her tap away at her phone. She thought she was so smart, like calling the cops would scare me into shutting off my fun. Ha! Good luck with that, lady. But here's the thing, and this is where it starts to get juicy. Karen didn't know something. Nope, not a single clue. While she was busy yelling at me and waving her phone around, I'd already seen something weird earlier that morning. Something that made my brain go hmm. See, when I went to grab the mail a few hours ago, I'd spotted 2 cop cars parked down the street. Not right by my house, but a little ways off, near that giant oak tree that's been there since forever. The cars weren't doing anything fancy, no flashing lights, no loud sirens. They were just sitting there. Quiet. Still. Waiting. Waiting for what? I had no idea. Not yet, anyway. But it stuck with me, Like when you see a puzzle piece that doesn't fit anywhere yet, but it's important. Those cop cars were a mystery, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen. Were they here for someone on our street? Maybe Mr. Thompson, the grumpy old guy who yells at kids for stepping on his lawn? Or the Carter family's dog, who barks at everything that moves? Nah, that didn't make sense. But I kept it in the back of my head, like a little secret I wasn't ready to tell anyone about. Not even Karen. So there I was, watching her stomp around and threaten me with her 911 call, and I couldn't help but grin. She thought she had the upper hand, like she was the queen of Oakwood Hills and I was some pesky kid she could boss around. But those cop cars? They were my little ace in the hole, even if I didn't know what they meant yet. I was about to find out, though. Oh yeah, things were going to get wild, and Karen had no idea she was walking right into it. She jabbed at her phone with her finger, muttering under her breath. "Stupid kid, thinks he can do whatever he wants," I heard her, but I didn't say anything. I just kept sipping my lemonade, letting the ice clink against the glass. The music was still playing, not as loud now, but loud enough to keep me happy. Karen shot me another glare, her eyes like little darts trying to poke holes in me. "You think this is funny?" she snapped. "We'll see who's laughing when the police get here." "Go ahead," I said, shrugging like it was no big deal. "Call M. See what happens." I was acting cool, but inside, my brain was buzzing. Those cop cars down the street, they weren't moving. Were they waiting for her call? Nah, that couldn't be it. They'd been there all morning, way before my music even started. So what was the deal? I glanced over at them again, just a quick peek so Karen wouldn't notice. The cars were still there, parked nice and neat, like they were part of the scenery. No cops outside yet, just the quiet hum of something waiting to happen. Karen didn't see me looking. She was too busy pacing back and forth in front of my yard, her flip-flops making that slap 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 sound again. She held the phone to her ear now, talking fast. "Yes, hello, this is Karen Mitchell from Oakwood Hills," she said, her voice all bossy and loud. "I've got a neighbor here blasting music, disturbing the peace. You need to send someone right now." I almost laughed out loud. Disturbing the peace? Man, she was laying it on thick. I pictured a cop showing up, listening to my tunes, and going, "Ma'am, this isn't a crime. Maybe just chill out." But I didn't say that. I just sat there, watching her make a fool of herself. She thought she was winning, but I had this funny feeling she was about to lose big time. The sun was high now, beating down on us. My yard was warm, and a little bead of sweat trickled down my neck. I wiped it away and took another sip of lemonade. Karen kept pacing, her phone pressed tight against her ear. Yes, it's an emergency," she said, her voice getting higher. "He's ruining the whole neighborhood." I shook my head. Ruining the neighborhood? Come on. It was just music. Good music, too, not some boring stuff like she probably listened to. I bet Karen's idea of fun was folding napkins or something lame like that. But as she kept talking, I started thinking more about those cop cars. Why were they here? Oakwood Hills wasn't the kind of place where cops just hung out. We didn't have bank robbers or wild parties or anything crazy like that. The most exciting thing that ever happened was when Tommy Carter's kite got stuck in a tree last summer, and even that wasn't a big deal. So 2 cop cars sitting there all quiet? That was weird. Really weird. I leaned forward a little in my chair, pretending to adjust my speakers, but really I was sneaking another look down the street. The cars were still there, no change. But now I saw something else. A shadow moved inside one of them. Just for a second, like someone shifting in their seat. My heart did a little hop. Someone was in there. Watching. Waiting. But for what? Or who? Karen's voice snapped me back. "They're on their way," she shouted, waving her phone at me like it was a trophy. "You're in trouble now, Jake." She smirked, crossing her arms over her chest. That clipboard was still tucked under her arm, like she couldn't let it go even for a second. I bet she slept with that thing at night, hugging it like a teddy bear. "Cool," I said, keeping my voice flat. "Guess we'll see." I wasn't scared, not really. Karen could call whoever she wanted. I wasn't doing anything wrong. But those cop cars, they were making me curious. More than curious. My brain was spinning, trying to figure it out. Were they here for me? No way. I hadn't done anything bad. So who, then? Mr. Thompson? The Carters? Or, wait a minute. Could it be Karen? Not, that didn't make sense. Not yet, anyway. Karen was the rule lady, the one who told everyone else what to do. She wouldn't break the law, right? She was too busy writing people up for dumb stuff like loud music or trash cans. But the more I thought about it, the more I wondered. What if she wasn't as perfect as she acted? What if those cops were here for her? I didn't say any of that out loud. Nope. I just sat there, letting her think she'd won this round. She stood at the edge of my yard, tapping her foot, waiting for sirens or flashing lights or whatever she thought was coming. She looked so sure of herself, like she'd finally put me in my place. But I wasn't worried about her stupid 911 call. I was thinking about those cars. Those quiet, sneaky cop cars that had been there all morning. The music kept playing, a little softer now but still good. The breeze picked up, blowing through the trees and making the leaves dance. A squirrel ran across my yard, stopping to look at us before darting away. Everything seemed normal except it wasn't. Not with Karen freaking out and those cops hiding down the street. Something was up. Something big. And I had a front row seat to watch it all go down. Karen glared at me again, her lips pressed tight. "You're going to learn to follow the rules," she said, her voice all smug and mean. "This neighborhood doesn't need people like you making trouble." She turned her back on me then, stomping back toward her house. Slap 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 went her flip-flops, echoing down the street. I watched her go, wondering what she'd do next. Call more people? Write me up again? Whatever it was, I wasn't sweating it. But those cop cars? They were still there. And now I was sure of it, someone was inside, watching. I couldn't see their faces, not from this far away, but I could feel it. Eyes on us. Eyes on her. My stomach did another little flip, and I took a big gulp of lemonade to calm it down. Karen thought she was about to ruin my day, but I had this funny feeling she was the one in for a surprise. Be sneak a peek to see if something weird was going on, like I did? Tell me in the comments, I'm dying to know. Because trust me, this story's about to get wild, and you won't believe what happens next. The air felt thicker now, like the day was holding its breath. Karen was back in her yard, standing by her perfect little fence, still holding her phone like it was her prize. She kept glancing at me, then down the street, like she was waiting for the cavalry to roll in and save her from my terrible, awful music. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. But mostly, I was too busy trying to figure out what was happening with those cop cars. I set my lemonade down on the table next to my speakers. The glass was sweaty now, little drops of water sliding down the side. I wiped my hands on my shorts and stood up, stretching my arms over my head. Karen saw me move and pointed at me again. "Don't you dare turn that up," she yelled. "The police are coming, and you're going to be sorry." Yeah, I muttered under my breath. I wasn't going to turn it up, I wasn't that dumb. But I did walk over to the edge of my yard, closer to the street, so I could get a better look at those cars. They were still there, tucked under the big oak tree's shadow. The leaves made little patterns on the ground, and the cars looked like they were part of the picture, quiet, still, sneaky. I squinted, trying to see inside, but the windows were too dark. No luck. Karen saw me looking. "What are you staring at?" she snapped, her voice cutting through the air. "Mind your own business." That made me laugh. Mind my own business? She was the one calling 911 over my music. If anyone needed to butt out, it was her. But I didn't say that. I just shrugged and turned back to my chair, acting like I didn't care. But I did care. A lot. Those cop cars were bugging me now. They'd been there too long to be random. Cops don't just park and sit for hours, right? Not unless they're up to something. My mind started racing, throwing out ideas like popcorn popping in a microwave. Maybe there was a robber hiding nearby. Maybe someone lost a pet and the cops were looking for it. Or maybe not, it couldn't be. Could it? Maybe Karen had done something bad, and they were here to catch her. I sat back down, my chair creaking under me. The music switched to a slower song, one with a deep bass that thumped like a heartbeat. Thump thump, thump thump. It matched the way my chest felt, kind of excited, kind of nervous. I picked up my lemonade again, but I didn't drink it. I just held it, letting the cold glass cool my hands. Karen was still in her yard, pacing now, her flip-flops making that annoying slap slap slap. She kept checking her phone, then looking down the street, then glaring at me. She was antsy, like a cat waiting to pounce. And me? I was antsy too, but I wasn't going to show it. I leaned back, crossing my legs, acting like I didn't have a care in the world. But my eyes kept darting to those cop cars. Every few seconds flick, checking to see if they'd moved. They hadn't. Not yet. But I knew something was coming. I could feel it in my bones, like when you know a storm's about to hit even though the sky's still clear. Karen stopped pacing for a second and stared at me hard. "You think you're so clever," she said, her voice dripping with meanness. "But you're not. You're just a loud, rude kid who doesn't know his place." She shook her head, like I was some big disappointment. "The cops'll fix that." "Sure, Karen," I said, giving her a little wave. "Whatever you say." I wasn't going to argue with her. What was the point? She was too mad to listen, and besides, I had bigger things to think about, like why those cop cars were still sitting there, silent as shadows. The day stretched on, the sun sliding a little lower in the sky. My lemonade was almost gone now, just a few melting ice cubes rattling around in the glass. I shook it, listening to the clink clink, and watched Karen stomp back toward her house again. She was muttering to herself, probably complaining about me to nobody. Her flip-flop slapped the pavement one last time before she disappeared behind her perfect fence. I was alone again, or so I thought. The music kept playing, filling the quiet with sound. The neighborhood seemed normal, birds singing, kids laughing somewhere down the street. But those cop cars? They weren't normal. They were a secret waiting to spill, and I was stuck in the middle of it, whether I liked it or not. And then it happened. Just as Karen vanished into her yard, I saw it, a tiny twitch of movement. One of the car doors cracked open, real slow, like it didn't want to be noticed. My heart jumped into my throat. This was it. Whatever those cops were here for, it was starting now. And Karen? She had no idea what was about to hit her. The sky was turning golden now, the sun dipping lower and making everything glow. My yard looked pretty in the light, with long shadows stretching across the grass. My speakers hummed, the song switching to one with a deep, rumbling bass that made my chair shake just a little. Karen paced faster, her flip-flops slapping harder, like she was annoyed the cops weren't here yet. This is ridiculous, she grumbled, loud enough for me to hear. I called ages ago. I didn't say anything. I just watched her, my lemonade forgotten on the table. My eyes kept flicking to those cop cars. Well, not the cars anymore, but the cops themselves. They were out now, moving slow and quiet, like hunters stalking a deer. The tall one was in front, his hands resting on his belt where his badge shone. The shorter one stayed close behind, holding that little radio tight. They were halfway between the oak tree and Karen's house now, and they still hadn't made a sound. My heart was thumping loud in my chest, thump thump, thump thump, like it wanted to jump out and run around. I couldn't believe Karen didn't see them. She was too busy being mad at me, too busy thinking she'd won. But those cops weren't here for my music. No way. They were here for something else, something about her. And every step they took made me more sure of it. I shifted in my chair, trying to look relaxed, but my hands were sweaty now. I wiped them on my shorts and picked up my glass again, just to have something to hold. The ice was all melted, leaving a puddle of warm lemonade at the bottom. I swirled it around, listening to the slosh slosh, and kept my eyes on Karen. She stopped pacing for a second and looked at me, her smirk fading a little. "What's wrong with you?" she snapped. "You look nervous." "Nah," I said, forcing a grin. "Just enjoying the show." I nodded at her, like she was the star of some funny play. She huffed and turned away, muttering something I couldn't hear. Good. I didn't want her to know I was watching the cops. I didn't want her to turn around, not yet. I wanted to see what happened next. The tall cop stopped walking, holding up a hand to stop the shorter one too. They were close to Karen's fence now, real close. Maybe 10 steps away. I could see their faces better now, even with the sun in my eyes. The tall one had a serious look, his mouth a straight line. The shorter one kept glancing around, like he was making sure no one else was watching. But I was. Oh yeah, I was watching hard. Karen started pacing again, her flip-flops loud against the pavement. Slap slap slap. She didn't hear the cops. She didn't see them. She was too wrapped up in her victory dance. "You're going to get what's coming to you," she called over to me, her voice all high and mighty. "The police don't let people break the rules." I almost laughed. Break the rules? She was one to talk. Those cops weren't here for me, they were creeping up on her. But why? My brain kept spinning, throwing out guesses. Maybe she didn't pay her taxes. Maybe she yelled at the wrong person. Or maybe, oh man, this was a good one, maybe she stole something from the HOA. Like money or something. She was always collecting dues, right? What if she kept some for herself? It sounded wild, but it fit. Karen loved being in charge of the HOA. She'd go door to door with that clipboard, demanding cash for neighborhood stuff like new signs or fancy flowers. What if she didn't use it all? What if she bought herself nice things instead, like those shiny new flip-flops or that fancy fence? My eyes went wide. That could be it. That could really be it. The cops took another step, then stopped again. The tall one pulled out his notebook and flipped it open, showing something to the shorter one. They both nodded, like they'd figured out the last piece of a puzzle. My stomach flipped. This was getting real. Whatever they had in that notebook, it was about Karen. I was sure of it now. She turned to me again, her smirk back in full force. "Any second now," she said, tapping her foot. "You'll see, Jake. You'll see." She looked down the street, but the wrong way, away from the cop cars, toward the other end of Oakwood Hills. She was waiting for sirens, for flashing lights, For cops to come roaring in to save her day. But they were already here. Right behind her. And she didn't even know it. I couldn't sit still anymore. I stood up, stretching my arms like I was bored, but really I just wanted a better view. The cops were so close to her fence now, maybe 5 steps away. The tall one put his notebook away and rested his hand on his belt again, near something shiny. Handcuffs. Oh man, were they going to arrest her? My heart raced faster. This was crazy. Crazy. Karen heard me stand and spun around. What are you doing? She barked, her eyes narrow. Sit down. You're not getting out of this. Just stretching, I said, keeping my voice light. I didn't sit, though. I stayed standing, leaning against my table, my eyes flicking between her and the cops. They were still moving slow, steady, silent. The shorter one said something into his radio again, his lips moving fast. I couldn't hear it, but I didn't need to. I knew what was coming. Something big. Something that would wipe that smirk right off Karen's face. And that's when I saw it, the last little clue before everything exploded. The tall cop pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. It was folded, but I could see writing on it, big and black. He unfolded it slow, holding it up so the shorter cop could see too. They both looked at it, then at Karen's house, then at each other. The tall cop nodded, and the shorter one smiled, just a tiny smile, but it was there. My mouth went dry. That paper, what was it? A note? A picture? No, wait. It looked official, like something important. A warrant? Yeah, that's it, a warrant. Like in the movies, when the cops have permission to arrest someone. My hands shook a little, and I shoved them in my pockets so Karen wouldn't notice. This was it. They were here to get her. I didn't know why yet, but I knew it was true. Karen kept pacing, kept smirking, kept throwing me those dumb looks. She had no idea the cops were right behind her, closing in like a net around a fish. She thought she was the hunter, but she was the one being hunted. And me? I was just the guy with the music, stuck in the middle, watching it all unfold. The music played on, the sun sank lower, and the cops took one more step. My gut was screaming now something big was about to happen. Something wild. And Karen? She was about to find out she wasn't as smart as she thought. Alright, let's jump into the climax and big reveal section. I'll stretch it out to at least 5,000 words using super simple English that a 4th or 6th grader can easily understand. I'll keep the suspense pumping and make the big twist feel huge, with lots of details to pull you in. Here we go. Climax and big reveal. Suddenly, I heard tires crunching on the road, like someone stepping on a pile of dry leaves. My head snapped up, and I saw them, 2 police cars rolling down the street. They weren't loud, no sirens screaming, no lights flashing, just moving slow and steady. I held my breath, waiting to see where they'd stop. My driveway? That's what Karen wanted, right? She'd called 911 to get me in trouble for my music. But nope. The cars didn't turn toward me. They rolled right past my yard and stopped in front of Karen's house. Her jaw dropped. Like, literally dropped. Her mouth hung open so wide I could see her teeth. She stood there, frozen like a statue, her phone still pressed against her ear from her 911 call. 3 officers climbed out of the cars, their badges shining bright in the sun. They looked serious, real serious. The tallest one stepped forward, his boots thumping on the pavement. Karen Mitchell, he called out, his voice sharp like a teacher yelling at a kid who's been naughty. Karen didn't move at first. She just stared, her eyes big and round. Her phone shook in her hand, and I could hear a tiny voice coming from it, the 911 lady, probably still talking. Why yes. Karen finally stammered, her voice all wobbly. That smug look she'd had all day? The one where she acted like she was the boss of everything? It was gone. Melted away like ice cream on a hot day. The officer didn't smile. He didn't even blink. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a pair of shiny silver handcuffs. They dangled from his hand, glinting in the sunlight. Ma'am, we've got a warrant for your arrest, he said, calm but firm. Fraud and theft from the HOA funds. Over $50,000 missing, and it all leads back to you. I nearly spit out my lemonade. Like, for real. I had the glass halfway to my mouth, and when he said that, I choked a little. The cold, sweet drink splashed on my chin, and I wiped it off quick with my sleeve. Karen. Stealing? No way. This was the same lady who'd knock on your door and yell if your bushes weren't trimmed just right. The same lady who'd fine you $5 if your mailbox was the wrong shade of blue. She'd been pocketing cash this whole time. My brain couldn't believe it. It was like finding out your teacher secretly ate all the cookies in the lunchroom. Karen's face went whiter than a ghost, whiter than the clouds floating in the sky. She looked like she might fall over, but she didn't. She just stood there, shaking her head fast. "This is a mistake," she shrieked, her voice so high it hurt my ears. "I didn't do anything. You've got the wrong person." But the officer didn't listen. He stepped closer, and the other two cops moved in too, like a team closing a circle. The handcuffs made a little click sound as he opened them, and then snap they went right around her wrists. I couldn't stop staring. My eyes were glued to the scene, wide and wild. Karen in handcuffs? This was nuts. Neighbors started peeking out their windows. I saw curtains twitch and faces pop up like curious squirrels. Mr. Thompson, the grumpy old guy from next door, opened his front door a crack and gawked. The Carter kids, Tommy and his little sister, pressed their noses against their window, their dog barking like crazy behind them. Everyone was watching, and they were gasping, whispering, pointing. "Karen." I heard someone say. "No way." But here's the best part, the kicker that made my jaw drop too. Karen's 911 call? The one she'd made to get me in trouble? It backfired big time. See, the dispatcher, the lady on the phone, didn't send new cops to our street. Nope. She patched the call straight through to the cops who were already here. The ones parked by the oak tree, waiting all morning. Karen had snitched on herself without even knowing it. She thought she was calling in the cavalry to shut down my music, but instead, she rang the bell for her own arrest. How's that for a twist? I set my lemonade down on the table, careful this time, no spilling, and stood up slow. My chair creaked, but I didn't care. I had to see this up close. Karen was yelling now, her voice bouncing off the houses. "Let me go. This is wrong. I'm innocent," she screamed, pulling against the handcuffs. But they didn't budge. The tall officer held her arm tight, guiding her toward the police car. The other two stood close, making sure she didn't wiggle free. "You'll need to come with us, ma'am," the tall officer said, his voice still calm but strong. "We've got evidence, lots of it. Bank records, fake receipts, all pointing to you." He sounded like he'd done this 100 times, like arresting Karen was just another day at work. But for me? This was the craziest thing I'd ever seen. Karen's flip-flops dragged on the ground as they pulled her along. Scrape, scrape, scrape. She wasn't stomping anymore. Oh no, that bossy strut was gone. Now she looked small, like a kid caught sneaking candy. Her phone slipped from her hand and hit the grass with a soft thud. Nobody picked it up. It just lay there, screen still glowing, the 911 call probably still going. I bet the dispatcher was listening, wondering what all the yelling was about. I took a step closer to the edge of my yard, my sneakers sinking into the soft grass. My music was still playing, some loud rock song with drums that went boom boom boom, and it mixed with Karen's shouts. The sun was low now, painting the sky orange and pink, and the police cars looked like big black shadows against it. Neighbors were coming out now, not just peeking. Mr. Thompson stepped onto his porch, scratching his head, and Mrs. Carter opened her door, holding her yappy dog back with one hand. "What's happening?" Mrs. Carter called out, her voice shaky. "Karen? Arrested?" She sounded like she didn't believe it, and I didn't blame her. I mean, Karen was the rule lady. The one who told us what to do. How could she be the bad guy? The tall officer turned his head a little, just enough to answer. "Theft," he said, short and simple. "She's been taking money from the HOA. A lot of money." He didn't yell it, he didn't need to. His words carried across the street, and everyone went quiet. Even Karen stopped screaming for a second, her mouth snapping shut like she'd run out of excuses. I couldn't help it, I grinned. A big, goofy grin that spread across my face. "Karen stealing? Over $50,000. That's a ton of money." I pictured her sneaking it into her purse, maybe buying fancy stuff like gold flip-flops or a giant TV. All while she fined us for dumb things like leaving a bike out. What a sneak. My lemonade sat forgotten on the table, and I crossed my arms, watching the show unfold. The shorter officer opened the back door of the police car, and the tall one pushed Karen toward it. "In you go," he said, not mean but not nice either. Karen shook her head again, her hair flying wild. "No, no, no," she cried. "You don't understand. I didn't steal anything. Someone set me up. But the cops didn't buy it. They'd heard that before, I bet." The tall one gave her a little nudge, not hard, just enough, and she stumbled into the back seat. The door slammed shut with a loud bang, and Karen's face pressed against the window. She looked at me, her eyes huge and wet, like she might cry. "Jake," she yelled, her voice muffled through the glass. Tell them I didn't do it." I just stood there, my grin fading a little. Tell them what? I didn't know anything except that she'd been a pain all day, and now she was in big trouble. The third officer, a guy with glasses who'd been quiet till now, picked up her phone from the grass. He tapped the screen, ending the 911 call, and slipped it into a little bag. "Evidence," he said to the tall officer, who nodded. "Evidence. Wow. This was real. They weren't messing around." I looked around, and the street was buzzing now. Neighbors were everywhere, on porches, in yards, whispering to each other. Tommy Carter ran out, his little sister trailing behind, and pointed at the police car. "Karen's going to jail," he shouted, like it was the coolest thing ever. Mrs. Carter shushed him, but she didn't look mad. She looked shocked, like the rest of us. The tall officer walked over to the car and leaned down to the window. "You'll get your chance to explain at the station," he told Karen. "But right now, you're coming with us." She banged her fists on the glass, thump, thump, but it didn't do any good. The handcuffs clinked against the window, and she slumped back, her face all red and sweaty. I couldn't believe it. Karen, a thief? My mind raced, piecing it together. All those HOA meetings where she'd boss us around, all those times she'd collect cash for neighborhood projects, where did it go? Not to new signs or flowers, that's for sure. Her fence was fancy, her car was shiny, and now I wondered, was that our money? My $5 for a late trash can find, did that buy her new flip-flops? The thought made me mad, but also kind of amazed. She'd fooled us all. The shorter officer climbed into the driver's seat, and the tall one got in the other car with the quiet guy. Engines rumbled, low and growly, and the cars started to move. Karen's face stayed glued to the window, staring out at me, at her house, at the neighbors. "This isn't over," she yelled, her voice faint as the car pulled away. "I'll be back. You'll see." But nobody believed her. Not me, not the cops, not the neighbors. The cars rolled down the street, slow at first, then faster, until they turned the corner and disappeared. Dust kicked up behind them, swirling in the air, and then it was quiet except for my music, still playing like nothing had happened. I stood there, my sneakers rooted to the grass, my mouth half open. Karen was gone. In handcuffs. For stealing. Over $50,000. It was the wildest thing I'd ever seen, and it happened right in front of me. My lemonade was warm now, the ice long gone, but I didn't care. I was too busy replaying it all in my head, the tires crunching, the handcuffs clicking, her jaw dropping. And that 911 call? Oh man, that was the best part. She'd called the cops on herself. How do you even do that? Neighbors started talking louder now, their voices mixing together. I knew something was off, Mr. Thompson grumbled, scratching his chin. She was too bossy. Mrs. Carter nodded, her dog yapping at her feet. All that money, gone. Tommy and his sister ran circles in their yard, chanting, "Karen's in jail. Karen's in jail." It was like a party, a weird, shocked, noisy party. I turned back to my chair and flopped down, my heart still racing. My speakers hummed, the song ending with a big guitar squeal. I looked at Karen's house, her perfect fence, her perfect flowers, her perfect little world. It didn't look so perfect now. It looked empty, like a shell with no crab inside. And then I laughed. A big, loud laugh that made my belly shake. Karen thought she'd get me in trouble, but she got herself instead. She'd been so smug, so sure, and now she was riding away in a police car. It was too good, too funny, too perfect. I grabbed my lemonade, took a sip of the warm, flat leftovers, and shook my head. What a day. What a crazy, wild day. The air felt different now, like the street had let out a big breath it'd been holding all day. My music kept playing, but it sounded far away, like background noise to the crazy movie playing in my head. I couldn't stop seeing at Karen's face when the cops showed up, the click of the handcuffs, the way her flip-flops dragged as they pulled her away. It was real, but it didn't feel real. Not yet. I looked at her house again. The front door was still closed, the windows dark. Her phone was gone, bagged up by the quiet cop, and her clipboard, oh man, where was her clipboard? I scanned the grass and spotted it, lying near her fence where she'd dropped it. The pages were fluttering in the breeze, like they wanted to spill all her secrets. I grinned again. That clipboard used to scare me, well, not scare me, but bug me. Every time she waved it around, I'd groan inside. Now, it was just a pile of paper, useless without her. Neighbors were everywhere now, like ants spilling out of a hill. Mr. Thompson shuffled over to Mrs. Carter, his slippers flapping on the pavement. $50,000, he said, his voice gruff. Can you believe it? That's more than my car. Mrs. Carter shook her head, her hands on her hips. I paid her $20 last month for new benches, she said. Where'd that go? Her purse. They both looked at Karen's house, then at me, like I had answers. Don't ask me, I said, holding up my hands. I just played my music. That got a laugh, a small one, but it felt good. Tommy and his sister ran over, their dog chasing behind, barking like it wanted in on the fun. Jake, did you see? Tommy yelled, his eyes huge. They put her in the car. With handcuffs. Yeah, I saw, I said, ruffling his hair. Pretty wild, huh? He nodded fast, his sister giggling beside him. She's a bad guy, she said, clapping her hands. Like on TV. I didn't argue. Karen did feel like a bad guy now, a sneaky one who'd tricked us all. The sun was almost gone, just a sliver of orange peeking over the trees. My yard was shadowy now, the table and speakers looking gray in the dim light. I sat back down, my chair squeaking loud, and let out a long breath. My lemonade glass was empty, just a sticky ring left inside. I set it down and leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. I couldn't stop thinking about it, Karen stealing, the cops waiting, that 911 call. It was like a puzzle snapping together, piece by piece. How long had she been doing it? Months. Years. I tried to remember all the HOA stuff she'd made us pay for. There was that time she said we needed new street signs, $50 each, she'd said. But the signs never changed. And last summer, she collected money for a playground, $20 a house. I didn't see any swings or slides go up. Had she kept it all? My head spun. That was our money, mine, Mr. Thompson's, Mrs. Carter's. She'd taken it and acted like she was doing us a favor. I looked up as more neighbors wandered over. There was old Mrs. Lee, who lived at the end of the street. She hobbled out with her cane, squinting at Karen's house. What's all this noise? She asked, her voice shaking. Tommy ran over to her, bouncing on his toes. Karen stole money, he shouted. The cops got her. Mrs. Lee's eyes went wide, and she clutched her cane tighter. Stole money? Our Karen? Yep, I said, nodding. Over $50,000. Mrs. Lee gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Goodness gracious, she whispered. I gave her $10 for flowers last spring. She shook her head, looking mad and sad at the same time. The street was alive now, full of chatter and gasps. Everyone had a story, $5 here, $10 there, all handed over to Karen with her clipboard and her smug smile. She fined me for my dog barking, Mrs. Carter said, patting her pup's head. Said it was a noise violation. $5. Mr. Thompson snorted. She got me for my trash cans, $10. Said they were out too long. I laughed again, softer this time. She nailed me for that too, I said. And my music. Always my music. We all looked at each other, then at her house, and it hit us she'd been playing us like a game. Collecting cash, writing fines, acting all high and mighty, while stuffing her pockets. $50,000. That's a lot of fines. The music faded out, my speakers going quiet for the first time all day. The street felt still without it, just the sound of voices and the rustle of leaves. I stood up again, stretching my legs, and walked to the edge of my yard. Karen's house looked creepy now, dark and empty in the twilight. The police cars were long gone, taking her with them, but her clipboard was still there, flapping in the wind. I wondered what she was doing right now. Was she still yelling? Crying? Sitting in the back of that car, hands stuck in those cuffs, realizing she'd messed up big? I almost felt bad for her, almost. But then I remembered her smirk, her finger pointing at me, her "you'll regret this" hiss. Nope. She'd dug this hole herself, and that 911 call? That was the shovel that buried her. Tommy ran up to me, his sister tugging his sleeve. "Jake, are they gonna lock her up forever?" he asked, his voice all excited. I shrugged. "I don't know, buddy. Depends on what the cops find. But she's in big trouble, that's for sure." He grinned, like it was a superhero story and Karen was the villain getting caught. Mrs. Carter walked over, her dog finally quiet. "You okay, Jake?" she asked, tilting her head. "She was after you all day." I nodded, kicking at the grass with my sneaker. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just, wow. Didn't see that coming." She smiled a little. "None of us did. She had us fooled." The sky was dark now, stars poking out one by one. My yard was cool and quiet, the heat of the day gone. I looked at my speakers, then at Karen's house, then back at the neighbors still milling around. This was the wildest Saturday ever, better than any movie, better than any game. Karen thought she'd shut me down, but she'd shut herself down instead. And that 911 call? Oh man, I'd laugh about that forever. I picked up my empty glass and headed toward my house, my sneakers swishing in the grass. The street was settling down, people drifting back to their porches, still whispering about Karen and her $50,000 secret. My music was off, but I didn't mind. The real show was over, and it'd been a doozy. The police cars were still there, parked right in front of Karen's house, their engines rumbling low like growly dogs. Karen was in the back of one, her face smashed against the window, yelling something I couldn't quite hear. Her voice was muffled, but I could tell she was madder than I'd ever seen her. The tall officer stood by the car, his arms crossed, watching her like she was a kid throwing a tantrum. The shorter one was talking into his radio, and the quiet guy with glasses was scribbling in a notebook, probably writing down everything that was happening. I stood at the edge of my yard, my sneakers sinking into the grass, just staring. My lemonade glass was still on the table behind me, warm and forgotten, but I didn't care about that now. This was too big, too wild. Karen in handcuffs? For stealing $50,000. My brain kept tripping over it, like a bike hitting a rock. She'd been so bossy, so perfect with her clipboard and her rules, and now she was caught big time. The tall officer leaned down to the car window again. "Calm down, ma'am," he said, his voice loud enough for me to hear. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." But Karen didn't calm down. Oh no. She banged her fists on the glass, thump, 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 and her face got redder than a fire truck. "This is a mistake," she screamed, her words clear now. "I didn't steal anything. You've got the wrong person. Let me out." The officer didn't flinch. He just shook his head, like he'd heard it all before. "We've got proof," he said, tapping his pocket where that warrant paper was. "Bank stuff, receipts, numbers, all of it says you took the money. You can tell your story at the station." He stepped back, done talking, and nodded to the shorter officer. "Let's go," he said. Karen freaked out even more. She kicked the door, bang, bang, and her flip-flops flew off, landing on the seat next to her. "No. No. No," she yelled, her voice cracking like she might cry. "I'm not a thief. I'm a good person. Jake, tell them." She turned her head, her eyes locking on me through the window. They were big and wet, like she was begging me to save her. I froze. Tell them what? I didn't know anything about her stealing. All I knew was she'd been yelling at me all day about my music, waving her phone like a weapon. I said, scratching my head. "I don't know, Karen. I just live here. That was all I could think to say. I wasn't lying, I really didn't know what she'd done. But I wasn't about to stick up for her either. Not after she tried to ruin my Saturday. Her face twisted up, like she couldn't believe I wasn't helping. You little brat, she snapped, banging the window again. This is your fault. Your stupid music started this. I blinked. My fault. How was this my fault? She was the one who called 911, the one who got the cops here. If anything, she'd tripped over her own feet, not mine. The tall officer sighed and waved a hand. That's enough, he said, loud and sharp. You're done. He turned to the shorter officer, who was still on his radio. She's all yours. Take her in. The shorter one nodded, climbed into the driver's seat, and started the engine. The car growled louder, ready to roll. But Karen wasn't done, not even close. She pressed her face so hard against the window I thought it might crack. You'll pay for this, Jake, she shouted, her voice all wobbly and wild. All of you will. I'll be back. This isn't over. She glared at me, then at the neighbors, then back at me, like she was cursing us all. Her hair was a mess now, sticking to her sweaty face, and her hands were stuck in those shiny handcuffs, clinking every time she moved. I couldn't help it, I smirked. Just a little. She looked so ridiculous, yelling and kicking like a kid who didn't get her way. See ya, Karen, I said, giving her a tiny wave. That made her madder. She screamed something I couldn't understand, maybe a curse word, maybe just nonsense, and the car started moving. The tires crunched again, kicking up dust, and she slid back into the seat, still shouting as they pulled away. The second car followed, the tall officer and the quiet guy inside. They drove slow at first, like they wanted us all to see, then picked up speed. Karen's face stayed glued to the window until they turned the corner and vanished. The street went quiet, well, almost quiet. My music was still playing, a soft guitar riff floating through the air. I'd forgotten about it, but there it was, like a happy little reminder that I was still here, still free. I turned around, and whoa, neighbors were everywhere now. It was like the whole street had popped out of their houses at once. Mr. Thompson was on his porch, leaning on the railing, muttering to himself. Mrs. Carter stood in her yard, holding her yappy dog tight, while Tommy and his sister ran around, laughing and pointing where the police cars had been. Old Mrs. Lee hobbled over with her cane, her eyes big behind her glasses. What happened? She asked, her voice all shaky. Did I hear right? Karen stole money. Yeah, I said, nodding. $50,000. From the HOA. Her mouth fell open, and she clutched her cane like it might run away. 50,000, she gasped. That's a lot. She shook her head, her gray hair bouncing. I gave her $5 for a new flag last year. Where'd that go? Probably her pocket, Mr. Thompson called over, his voice gruff. She got me for $10 once, said my mailbox was rusty. Rusty? It's fine. He pointed at his mailbox, which looked old but not that old. Mrs. Carter chimed in, her dog barking between words. She fined me for my grass being too tall. $5? I bet she bought herself a fancy hat with it. I laughed a big, loud laugh that made my belly shake. They were all mad, but it was funny too. Karen had been sneaking our money, little by little, and we'd never guessed. $5 here, $10 there, it added up to $50,000. I pictured her counting it in her house, maybe giggling to herself, thinking she was so smart. Well, she wasn't giggling now. Tommy ran up to me, his sneakers squeaking on the grass. Jake, did you see her face? He asked, grinning big. She was so mad. Like a cartoon. His sister nodded, hopping up and down. She yelled at you. She said it's your fault. I ruffled Tommy's hair and shrugged. Yeah, she's nuts. It's not my fault she got caught. Mrs. Carter walked over, her dog finally quiet. You okay, Jake? She asked, tilting her head. She was after you all day with that music stuff. I nodded, kicking at the grass with my sneaker. I'm good. Just, wow. Didn't think she'd end up in handcuffs. She smiled a little. Nobody did. She fooled us all. The sky was getting dark now, the orange glow fading to purple. Stars twinkled overhead, and the air felt cool against my skin. My yard was shadowy, my speakers just a dark lump on the table. The music switched to a slower song, one with a deep beat that thumped like my heart thump, thump, thump. I picked up my lemonade glass, but it was empty, just a sticky ring inside. I set it back down and looked at Karen's house again. It looked different now, quiet, empty, kind of sad. Her perfect fence didn't seem so perfect anymore. Her flowers drooped a little in the dim light, like they knew she was gone. That clipboard was still there, lying in the grass, pages flapping like they wanted to escape. I wondered if the cops would come back for it, or if it just sit there till someone picked it up. Neighbors kept talking, their voices buzzing like bees. "I can't believe it," Mrs. Lee said, shaking her cane. She was so bossy. Always telling me my porch light was too bright. $10 for that. Mr. Thompson snorted. She got me for my cat $5 cause he scratched her fence. Her precious fence. He rolled his eyes, and I laughed again. Tommy and his sister started playing a game, pretending to be cops. "You're under arrest," Tommy shouted, chasing her around the yard. She squealed and ran, giggling like crazy. "Not me. I'm the good guy," she yelled back. Mrs. Carter watched them, shaking her head but smiling. "Kids," she said to me. "They think it's a big adventure." "It kind of is," I said, grinning. "I mean, Karen in jail? That's wild." She nodded, petting her dog. "Wild and weird. I wonder what happens now. Who's gonna run the HOA?" I shrugged. "Not me. I just wanna play my music." The street was settling down a bit, but people weren't going inside yet. They stood in little groups, whispering and pointing at Karen's house. I heard bits of it. 50,000. Handcuffs. She yelled at Jake. And it made me smile. This was the talk of Oakwood Hills now, the biggest thing to happen since forever. And I'd been right here, front row, watching it all. I walked over to my table and turned off my speakers. The music stopped, and the quiet felt loud like the whole day had been shouting, and now it was done. I picked up my glass and headed toward my house, my sneakers swishing in the grass. The neighbors' voices faded behind me, but I could still hear Tommy laughing, still hear Mrs. Lee muttering about her $5. Inside, I set my glass in the sink and peeked out my window. Karen's house was dark, just a shape against the night sky. I thought about her in that police car, probably still yelling, still blaming me. But it wasn't my fault. It was hers. She'd stolen, she'd lied, and that 911 call? Oh man, that was the cherry on top. She'd dialed her own doom, and I'd never forget it. I flopped onto my couch, kicking off my sneakers. My head was spinning, but in a good way, like after a roller coaster when you're dizzy but happy. Karen was gone, the cops had her, and the street was ours again. No more clipboard, no more fines, no more smug looks. Just quiet, well, until I turned my music back on tomorrow. I sat on my couch for a minute, staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet, just the hum of the fridge in the kitchen. Outside, I could hear the neighbors still talking soft now, like they were winding down. I got up and went back to the window, peeking through the blinds. Tommy and his sister were still running around, pretending to arrest each other. Mrs. Carter was calling them in, her voice tired but gentle. "Time to eat, you two," she said. Mr. Thompson shuffled back to his porch, grumbling about his $10. I smiled. This was nuts. Karen had been the big boss of our street. Well, she thought she was. She'd march around with that clipboard like it was a crown, telling us all what to do. "Trim your bushes, Jake. Move your trash cans, Mr. Thompson. Pay up, Mrs. Carter." And we did it not cause we liked her, but cause she wouldn't stop nagging till we did. But now, she was the one in trouble, and we were free. I thought about that $50,000 again. $50,000. That's so much money, like, enough to buy a car or a boat or a million candy bars. Where did it go? I pictured Karen hiding it under her bed in big stacks, counting it at night like a pirate with treasure. Did she spend it? Save it? I didn't know, but the cops did. That warrant, they'd said bank records and receipts. They had proof, real proof, not just guesses. I wandered back to my kitchen and filled my glass with water. No more lemonade, I was out. I took a big gulp, the cold feeling good after such a hot, crazy day. My mind kept spinning. How'd she do it? Sneak $5 here, $10 there? Fake stuff to trick us? Like, maybe she'd say, oh, we need new lights, $20 each, and then keep it. Or pay me for the picnic, $10, and no picnic ever happened. She was sneaky, super sneaky. I went back to the window, sipping my water. The street was emptier now, just a few people left. Mrs. Lee was hobbling home, her cane tapping the pavement. Mr. Thompson was inside, his porch light flicking on. Mrs. Carter dragged Tommy and his sister through their door, the dog yapping one last time. It was dark out there, the stars bright and twinkly. Karen's house sat quiet, like it was sleeping or maybe hiding. I wondered what the cops were doing with her now. Was she at the station? In a room with a table, like on TV? Were they asking her questions? Where's the money, Karen? Why'd you do it? And was she still yelling? I bet she was. She'd yell till her voice gave out, probably. I'm innocent. It's Jake's fault. Ha! Good luck with that, lady. I set my water down and grabbed a bag of chips from the counter. I was hungry. Watching Karen get busted was hard work. I munched a chip, the salt crunching loud in the quiet, and thought about that 911 call again. That was the funniest part. She'd dialed, all smug and sure, thinking she'd get me. Yes, officer, it's an emergency, she'd said. And the dispatcher? She'd sent it right to the cops already here, cops who were waiting for her. It was like she'd tied her own shoelaces together and tripped. Too perfect. I flopped back on the couch, the chips in my lap. The street was silent now, no voices, no barking, no police cars. Just me and my thoughts. Karen was gone, and tomorrow would be different. No more banging on my door about my music. No more fines for dumb stuff. Just me, my speakers, and a quiet street. Well, quiet till I cranked the volume again. I grinned, popping another chip in my mouth. What a day. What a wild, crazy, awesome day. All right, let's tackle the resolution and justice served section. I'll write it out to at least 5,000 words, using super simple English that a 4th or 6th grader can easily understand. I'll make it fun, wrap up the story nice and tight, and show how justice wins in the end. Here we go. Resolution and justice served. The police car door was wide open, and the cops were stuffing Karen into the back seat. She didn't go easy, oh no. She wiggled and squirmed like a worm on a hook, but the tall officer held her arms tight. Her flip-flops were off now, lying on the ground where she'd kicked them, and her hands were stuck in those shiny handcuffs. As they pushed her in, she turned her head and glared at me hard. Her eyes were like little fireballs, burning right through me, like I'd done something awful. Like I was the bad guy here. Ha! No way. I just stood there at the edge of my yard, my sneakers in the grass, and gave her a big, goofy wave. Bye, Karen. I said, loud enough for her to hear. Then I reached over to my speakers, cranked the music back up, boom, 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 and grinned wide. The guitars screamed, the drums thumped, and my whole yard filled with sound again. She wanted me quiet? Too bad. She was leaving, and I was staying, music and all. The car door slammed shut with a big bang, and Karen's face smashed against the window. She was still yelling. I could see her mouth moving fast, but the glass muffled it. Something like, you'll pay, or this is your fault. I didn't care. I just waved again, wiggling my fingers, and watched the cops climb in. The engines growled, the tires crunched, and off they went down the street, around the corner, gone. Karen was headed to jail, and I couldn't stop smiling. The neighborhood wasn't quiet, though not even close. It buzzed like a beehive kicked over. Neighbors spilled out of their houses, whispering and pointing where the police cars had been. Mr. Thompson shuffled over to Mrs. Carter, his slippers slapping the pavement. Did you hear? He said, his voice all scratchy. She stole money, years of it. Mrs. Carter nodded, holding her yappy dog tight. Faking receipts too, she said. Living large while she nagged us. I stayed in my yard, listening to the chatter. Turns out Karen hadn't just taken a little cash here and there. Nope. She'd been skimming HOA dues for years, sneaky little bits from everybody. $5 for this, $10 for that, all adding up to a big pile. She'd made fake papers receipts, they called them to trick us. Like, she'd say, oh, we need money for new flowers, and then keep it. Or pay up for a picnic, and no picnic ever happened. She was living fancy new fence, shiny car, maybe even fancy flip-flops while she bossed us around like we were the problem. Now, she was caught, and the HOA was free. No more Karen, no more reign of terror. I sat back in my wobbly chair, the one with the creaky leg, and let my music play. The sun was almost gone, the sky all purple and starry, and the air felt cool. My lemonade glass was empty on the table, just a sticky ring left inside, but I didn't mind. I was too busy grinning, thinking about how Karen's day went from smug to sunk. She thought she'd get me in trouble with that 911 call, but she got herself instead. How's that for a twist? A little while later, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 20, Mrs. Carter walked over to my yard, her dog trotting behind her. Tommy and his sister were inside now, probably eating dinner, and the street was quieter. She stopped by my table and looked at me, her hands on her hips. Jake, she said, her voice soft but curious, did you know about this? I shook my head fast. Nope. I just played my music. She's the one who freaked out. Mrs. Carter smiled a little, like she believed me but still couldn't believe the day. Well, she said, I talked to Mr. Thompson after the cops left. He told me something wild. They'd suspected her for months, but needed proof. Proof? I asked, sitting up straighter. My chair squeaked loud, but I ignored it. What kind of proof? She leaned in, like it was a big secret. Bank stuff, she said. Papers showing money going missing. They'd been watching her all day, those cop cars by the oak tree. That was them, waiting for the right moment to grab her. She paused, petting her dog's head. Your music? It was just the cherry on top. Made her snap and seal her own fate. I blinked, then laughed a big, loud laugh that echoed across the yard. No way. I said, slapping my knee. So she called 911, and they were already here. Mrs. Carter nodded, her eyes twinkling. Yep. She dialed right into her own trap. Dispatcher sent it to the cops on her street, bam, done. I leaned back, shaking my head. That was too good. Karen thought she was so smart, so in charge, but she'd tripped over herself. My music didn't bring the cops, they were already coming. I just gave her the push to mess up big. The cherry on top, like Mrs. Carter said. I pictured her pacing, smirking, dialing that phone, not knowing the cops were steps away, ready to pounce. Too funny. Mrs. Carter sat down on the grass next to my table, her dog flopping beside her. You know, she said, we all hated her fines she got me for my dog barking, $5. But stealing? That's next level. She looked at Karen's house, all dark and quiet now. What do you think she did with it? Dunno, I said, shrugging. Maybe a big TV. Or a fancy car. She's got that nice fence, bet that cost a lot. Mrs. Carter nodded. Yeah. And we paid for it us, Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Lee. Sneaky lady. We sat there for a bit, the music playing soft now, a slow song with a guitar that hummed like a lullaby. The street was calm, just a few porch lights glowing. I thought about Karen in that police car, probably yelling her head off. Did she know we were free now? No more clipboard, no more rules, no more her? I hoped she did. I hoped it bugged her big time. Mr. Thompson wandered over then, his slippers making that slap slap sound. He stopped by my yard and crossed his arms, looking grumpy like always. Good riddance, he said, spitting the words out. She fined me $10 for my trash can, said they were out too long. Now I know where that went, her greedy hands. I grinned at him. She got me for that too, I said. And my music every week, almost. Mr. Thompson snorted, a little laugh sneaking out. Music's fine, kid. She's the noise we don't need. He turned and shuffled back to his house, muttering about his $10. Mrs. Carter stood up, brushing grass off her pants. Well, Jake, you survived her, she said, smiling. We all did. Night's ears now play that music loud. She winked and walked off, her dog trotting behind, tail wagging. I looked at my speakers, the black boxes humming with sound. The song ended, and a new one started fast, happy, full of drums. I cranked it up a little more, boom, 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 and let it fill the night. Karen was gone, justice was served, and the neighborhood felt lighter, like a big weight lifted off. No more fines, no more glares, no more her. Just us, free at last. I grabbed my empty glass and headed inside, flipping on my porch light. The street glowed soft, houses warm and cozy. Karen's place stayed dark, a shadow against the rest. I wondered what had happened to it. Would someone new move in? Someone nice, maybe. I hoped so. We'd had enough of her kind. Inside, I dumped my glass in the sink and flopped on my couch. My sneakers kicked off, my feet up, I listened to the music drifting in from outside. It sounded good, real good. I thought about the day, Karen's smirk, the cop cars, the handcuffs, that 911 call. What a ride. She'd ruled us for years, sneaking cash, acting big, but now she was done. Jail was waiting, and we were free. I closed my eyes, smiling. Justice served, yep, it sure was. My music played on, and I let it carry me into the night. The next morning, I woke up early, too excited to sleep late. The sun was just peeking over the trees, turning the sky pink and gold. I grabbed a bowl of cereal, crunchy stuff with marshmallows, and sat by my window, looking out at the street. My speakers were quiet now, turned off for the night, but I'd crank them later. Oh yeah, I would. No Karen to stop me now. I munched my cereal, the marshmallows sweet on my tongue, and watched the neighborhood wake up. Mr. Thompson was out already, watering his scraggly bushes with a rusty old can. Mrs. Carter's dog barked at a squirrel, and Tommy and his sister ran out, chasing each other with sticks. It was normal stuff, happy stuff, but it felt different. Lighter. Like the air was cleaner without Karen's nagging hanging over us. I finished my cereal and rinsed the bowl, thinking about what Mrs. Carter said, how they'd suspected Karen for months. Months. That blew my mind. How'd they know? Who figured it out? I pictured secret meetings, neighbors whispering, she's up to something, passing notes like spies. Maybe Mr. Thompson saw her buying something fancy and got suspicious. Or Mrs. Lee noticed the HOA money never fixed anything. They needed proof, though real stuff, not just guesses. And the cops had it, bank papers, fake receipts, numbers that didn't lie. I went outside, my sneakers crunching on the porch steps, and took a deep breath. The morning was cool, the grass still wet with dew. My yard looked the same: table, speakers, wobbly chair, but it felt like mine again. No Karen stomping over to yell, no clipboard waving in my face. I walked to the table and ran my hand over the speakers, grinning. You're safe now, I said to them, like they could hear me. Silly, maybe, but I felt it. Mrs. Carter came out then, her dog on a leash. She saw me and waved. Morning, Jake, she called, walking over. Sleep okay after all that? I nodded, leaning against the table. Yeah, pretty good. Still can't believe it, Karen in jail. She laughed, a soft chuckle. Me neither. But I'm glad. She had it coming. She tugged the leash as her dog sniffed my grass. Mr. Thompson told me more last night. He's been grumpy about her for ages. Said she fined him $15 once for his cat scratching her car. 15. I whistled low. That's nuts. She got me for 10 once. Trash cans again. Mrs. Carter rolled her eyes. Trash cans, cats, barking dogs, she had a list. But it's over now. Cops got her good. Yeah, I said, kicking at a pebble. That 911 call, she really messed up there. Mrs. Carter grinned big. Oh, that's the best part. She thought she'd get you, but nope, straight to her own handcuffs. We both laughed, the sound bouncing off the houses. It was funny and perfect. Tommy ran over then, his stick waving like a sword. Jake. Jake. Is Karen really gone? He asked, his eyes wide. I nodded. Yep, buddy. Cops took her. She's in jail now. He jumped up and down, cheering. Yay. No more mean lady. His sister peeked out from behind Mrs. Carter, giggling. She was scary, she said, her voice tiny. Always mad. Not anymore, I said, ruffling Tommy's hair. She's mad somewhere else now. They ran off, swinging their sticks, pretending to be cops again. You're under arrest. Tommy yelled, chasing his sister across the yard. Mrs. Carter watched them, shaking her head. They'll talk about this for weeks, she said. We all will. She was right. The street was still buzzing, even now. Mrs. Lee came out, her cane tapping slow, and waved at me. Jake, she called. You hear about Karen? I nodded, walking over to her fence. Yeah, Mrs. Lee, $50,000. Her mouth dropped open again, like the first time she'd heard. Goodness, she said. I gave her $10 for a new bench. No bench. None of us got what we paid for, I said, leaning on her fence. She kept it all. Mrs. Lee shook her head, her glasses slipping down her nose. Sneaky, sneaky. Glad she's gone. She smiled at me, a wrinkly little smile. Play your music today, Jake. Loud as you want. I grinned back. Oh, I will. Promise. She nodded and hobbled back inside, muttering about her $10. I turned around, looking at the street, Mr. Thompson watering, Tommy running, Mrs. Carter walking her dog. It was ours again, all ours, and Karen couldn't touch it. I went back to my yard and flipped on my speakers. The music blasted out boom, 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 happy and loud, filling the air. I cranked it up high, higher than yesterday, just because I could. No one glared, no one yelled. Mr. Thompson even tapped his foot a little, watering can in hand. Tommy danced in his yard, waving his stick like a baton. Freedom sounded good, real good. Later, I sat on my porch with a new glass of lemonade, fresh squeezed, cold as ice. The sun climbed higher, warming everything up, and I sipped slow, watching the day roll by. Karen was gone, justice was served, and the HOA was free. My music? Just the cherry on top, like Mrs. Carter said, a little push that helped her fall. She'd ruled us too long, but not anymore. Jail had her now, and we had our street. I leaned back, smiling. What a win. What a big, awesome win. So, there you have it, folks, my crazy Saturday story. It started with music, ended with handcuffs, and wow, what a ride it was. Sometimes the loudest complainers, the ones who yell and point fingers, are hiding the dirtiest secrets. Karen thought she could boss me around, scare me with her clipboard, and shut my music down with one phone call. But guess what? In the end, she couldn't outrun the truth. Nope. The truth caught her like a big net, and off she went, busted, caught, done. I'm sitting here now, on my porch, sipping a fresh glass of lemonade. The sun's high, the sky's blue, and my speakers are humming a soft tune, not too loud, just nice. The neighborhood's quiet today, but it's a good quiet. No Karen stomping over, no flip-flop slapping, no mean glares. Just birds chirping and a breeze rustling the trees. It's peaceful, and it makes me think, really think about what happened. Karen was loud, right? Always shouting, always mad about something. My music, Mr. Thompson's trash cans, Mrs. Carter's dog, she had a list a mile long. She acted like she was the queen of Oakwood Hills, like her rules were the only thing that mattered. But all that noise? All that bossing? It was a cover. A big, loud cover for her sneaky secrets. She was taking our money, $5, $10, little bits that added up to $50,000, and hiding it while she nagged us. That's wild, isn't it? The loudest person on the street was the one with the most to hide. It makes me wonder who's really making noise in your life. You know, those people who complain all the time, who point and yell and act like they're perfect. What are they hiding? Maybe not $50,000 ha, but something. A secret, a trick, something they don't want you to see. Karen taught me that. She was all big talk and mean looks, but underneath? She was a thief, sneaking around, hoping we'd never catch on. But we did. Well, the cops did, and I got to watch. I take a sip of my lemonade, the cold hitting my tongue, and lean back in my chair. It creaks a little, that wobbly leg still needs fixing, but I don't mind. My yard looks happy today. The grass is green, the table steady, and my speakers sit there like old friends. Yesterday was nuts, cop cars, handcuffs, Karen yelling, but today? Today's mine. No one's telling me to turn my music down, no one's waving a clipboard in my face. It's just me and the day, and that feels good. I think about Karen in jail right now. Is she still mad? Still yelling? Probably. I picture her in a little room, banging on a table, telling the cops it's all a mistake. I'm innocent, she'd scream. It's Jake's fault. Ha! Good luck with that, lady. The cops have proof, bank papers, fake receipts, all that stuff she thought she'd hidden. She can't talk her way out of this one. The truth's too strong, too real. It found her, and it won. That's the cool part, isn't it? The truth always wins in the end. It might take a while, months, years, who knows, but it comes out. Karen thought she could hide forever, sneaking our money, acting big, but nope. The cops were watching, the neighbors were whispering, and my music? It just gave her a little push to trip. She dialed that 911 call, all smug and sure, and bam, it went straight to the cops already here for her. That's like kicking your own soccer ball into your own goal. Ouch. I laugh a little, the sound mixing with the music. My lemonade's half gone now, the ice clinking in the glass. I swirl it around, clink, clink, and look out at the street. Mr. Thompson's watering his bushes again, grumbling to himself. Tommy and his sister are riding bikes, zooming up and down, laughing loud. Mrs. Carter's dog barks at a bird, and Mrs. Lee's porch light flicks on, even though it's daytime. Everything's normal, but better. Karen's gone, and we're free. It makes me think about you, yeah, you, reading this. Who's the Karen in your life? You know, that person who's always loud, always bossy, always telling you what to do. Maybe it's a kid at school who brags too much. Or a grown-up who nags about silly stuff like tie your shoes, or be quiet, when you're just having fun. What are they hiding? Are they scared? Sneaky. Trying to cover something up with all that noise? Next time they yell, look a little closer. Maybe they're not as big as they seem. I learned that from Karen. She was loud, but she wasn't strong. She was sneaky, but she wasn't smart. The truth was stronger, way stronger. It's like a superhero, you know? It doesn't need to shout or show off. It just waits, quiet and calm, then swoops in when the time's right. Now, Karen's in jail now, and we're here, living our days, playing our music, free as birds. I stand up, stretching my arms high. My chair wobbles, but I catch it with my foot, still gotta fix that leg. I walk to the edge of my porch and look at Karen's house. It's dark, quiet, empty. Her fence is still perfect, her flowers still neat, but it doesn't matter. She's not there to brag about it. Someone new will move in someday, someone nice, I hope. No clipboards, no fines, just a neighbor who waves hello. That'd be cool. The music switches to a fast song, drums thumping, guitars rocking, and I tap my foot. I could turn it up, blast it loud, but I don't. Not yet. I'm saving that for later, when the sun's hot and the day's wide open. For now, I just listen, letting it hum through me. This is my street now, ours, really. Me, Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Carter, Tommy, Mrs. Lee, all of us. Karen's reign is over, and we're the winners. I sip my lemonade again, the glass cold in my hand. It's sweet, tangy, perfect. I think about yesterday, Karen's glare, the cop cars, the handcuffs clicking. It was wild, messy, loud, but it ended right. Justice won. Truth won. And me? I just played my music, sipped my drink, and watched it all go down. Sometimes, that's all you need to do, keep being you, and the truth sorts the rest. So, what about you? Have you ever dealt with a Karen like this? Someone who bossed you around, made you mad, acted all high and mighty? Drop a comment, tell me your story. I wanna hear it. Did they get caught? Did the truth come out? Or are they still out there, making noise? Spill it, I'm all ears. And hey, if you like this twisty tale, give it a thumbs up. It's got everything: music, cops, a sneaky lady getting busted. If you want more stories like this, hit that subscribe button. I've got plenty more where this came from. Crazy days, big twists, Fun endings I'll keep 'em coming. See you next time, folks. I set my glass down and head inside, the music still playing soft behind me. The day's young, the street's mine, and I'm ready for whatever comes next. Karen's gone, the truth's out, and life's good. Real good. I flop on my couch, kicking off my sneakers. They land with a thud by the door, and I stretch out, hands behind my head. The music drifts in through the open window, soft guitars, a slow beat, like the day's taking a breath. I stare at the ceiling, little cracks spidering across it, and think about Karen again. Not mad, not anymore, just curious. How'd she think she'd get away with it? Stealing all that money, acting so perfect? Did she ever worry she'd get caught? Or was she too busy bossing us to care? It's funny, people like her. They make so much noise, wave their fists, act all big. But noise isn't power. Nope. It's just sound, empty sound. Real power's quiet, like the cops waiting by the oak tree. They didn't yell, didn't brag. They just watched, waited, then moved. That's strength, knowing you've got the truth and letting it do the work. Karen's noise? It was a mask, hiding her sneaky hands. But masks fall off, and hers did, right in front of everybody. I sit up, grabbing a pillow to hug. My room's messy, socks on the floor, a comic book open on the table, but it's mine. No one's yelling at me to clean it, no one's fining me for it. That's freedom, right there. Karen's gone, and I can be me. Loud music, messy room, lemonade all day. She thought she could control us, but she couldn't. The truth set us free, not with a shout, but with a simple click of handcuffs. I think about you again, you, out there, reading this. What's your street like? Your school? Your world? Is there a loudmouth making trouble, acting big? Don't let 'em fool you. Watch close, they might be hiding something. And don't be scared to be you. Play your music, ride your bike, whatever makes you happy. The truth's on your side, even if it's quiet. It'll show up when you need it, just like it did for us. I get up and peek out the window one more time. The street's alive now. Tommy's bike zips by, Mrs. Carter's watering her flowers, Mr. Thompson's grumbling at his cat. It's ours again, all ours. Karen's house sits there, dark and still, like a reminder. She was loud, she was mean, but she wasn't unbeatable. The truth was bigger, and it won. I head back to my porch, grabbing my lemonade on the way. The glass is sweaty, dripping a little, but I sip it slow, savoring it. The music picks up, drums kicking in, guitars singing, and I tap my foot, grinning. This is my day, my street, my win. Karen's gone, justice is here, and I'm free. You can be you, stay true, and let the loudmouths fall. They always do. Thanks for sticking with me, folks. Drop that comment, tell me about your Karens, your crazy days. Thumbs up if you liked it, subscribe for more, I've got tons of tales to tell. See you next time, and keep rocking your world.